Hi, welcome. I'm super excited to be here. My name is Oskar Stokholm Østergaard, and I am a project manager at the Danish Design Center. The Danish Design Center is a nonprofit organization that is like partly funded by the state that aims to be the Danish laboratory for design. And Part of being a lab means experimenting with new design approaches like our work on scenarios, which is what I'm going to talk about today. I think we have quite a program to get through. So I think we might just kind of get started and people might just join along the way. So the program for today is really about giving you all a taste of the potential that we see in this space that kind of lies in the intersections of design, foresight, and storytelling. So first, I'll say a few words about our approach and give a bit of a background. And second, we'll take a trip to the future together. We'll do this by visiting a set of scenarios that we've been developing and listen to some narrated stories. This is like a sneak peek of a more complete toolkit that we're releasing publicly this fall. So I hope you're ready. When we talk to organizations, uncertainty is a word that comes up a lot, especially with the pandemic. It feels a bit like we have to constantly be on the lookout for danger or unexpected things. Um, that could suddenly change things for the worse or yeah you know and at the same time, I don't think I'm the only one also feeling what might on the surface look like the exact opposite, um, that we've locked in a course and turned on the autopilot and nothing can really turn it off. I mean, even as we're feeling everything shaking as we continue to head into the storm. I mean, I woke up yesterday and I watched the first presidential debate from the US, and I was honestly a little shocked about how little it really shocked me. I can't be the only one feeling that way. And I mean, I can't be the only one wondering how did we get to this point where that is what we expect. When I talk to others, it often seems like we only have two options. To either continue down the path that we're already on and kind of bet on technology, whatever that might turn out to be, to save us, or face some kind of world-ending apocalypse. This is not necessarily about reimagining capitalism, but I think this quote by Frederick Jameson is interesting as it highlights exactly how hard it is for us to escape those like guardrails that are put up by the status quo that kind of limits our ideas of what the future might be. I think for many, it's easier to imagine fighting for your life in some kind of Mad Max post-apocalyptic hell where you pay for goods and services by selling your blood than imagining just simply reading a book on a lazy Sunday in a world where you just don't pay for things. I mean, at least not until the pandemic hit and we saw just how much is actually able to change very quickly. Um, I mean, we're all aware of the like huge systemic issues that we face, and to what we hope our work and the tools that I'm presenting here today might help people in doing is kind of unlocking the future and the potential it holds simply by not having happened yet. By going beyond our like base expectations, we're able to see that the future could be so much more. I mean, this could brighten your outlook or make it even darker, but it could also kind of gives you agency. The idea that the future is malleable and you can shape it, you can act on it, even if in the short term, if this only in the short term means that you're moving things like ever so slightly in the direction that you want to, it's kind of still moving toward like a larger goal that you're able to imagine. Um, This quote by like the late David Graeber says this really well. Like the ultimate hidden truth of the world is that it's something that we make and could just as easily make differently. And I think this is really what it is that we're trying to do here. What we try to do is try to take some of the aspects of strategic foresight and storytelling and kind of bring them into the design space. We try in a nice and welcoming way to force people into imagining radically different futures. So the concept of scenarios aren't new, but instead of like handing people a text, that we try to evoke a more empathetic and immediate reaction by communicating the scenarios through stories from humans living in the futures. So it's very much story-based. We tend to just call it scenario design because it's simple, but in reality, it's a mix of a whole range of different disciplines like speculative design, design futures, futuring design, design fiction, experiential futures, and so on. But we think this is really powerful for several reasons. First off, it gives you a shared experience. Having experienced the same stories and the same scenarios as your colleague gives you a shared frame of reference. This can really open up the conversation. Talking about automation, for example, is less toxic for a manufacturing company if we're not talking next year, but talking 2050. Then it's no longer a question of budgets or layoffs or something that is like very immediate and very close. Additionally, it can also help foster this sense of empathy for the people of the future that we're really going for. When you hear a person talk about their life, you might be able to kind of imagine what it might feel like to live in that reality yourself. You can kind of feel it on your body. By focusing the conversation on this kind of human experience, it levels the playing field and it gives everyone a more equal access to participating in these discussions. No matter if you're a fifth grader, an academic, or someone who's been working in a field for 30 years, your immediate human reaction is equally valid. We also use this to kind of test hypotheses, like if you have a strategy, an initiative, or like a business model, you can use the scenarios as like a wind tunnel by subjecting like your object to the four scenarios. You're able to kind of identify potential weaknesses or opportunities for improvement. So what I'm presenting today is a set of scenarios that we call living futures. Living futures consists of among other things, four radically different scenarios for the future of society that is being explored through a series of stories. So how we normally use it is that we bring people into the future, like in a workshop setting, for example. We give them the experience of listening to the stories, just like we're going to do in a second. And then we kind of head back to the present where we discuss what our new perspectives might suggest we do here and now. The scenarios are based on a like very classic foresight method of the 2x2 matrix that kind of is then based on two major uncertainties. Each axis of the 2x2 matrix represents an uncertainty, like a question that could go one of two ways. Like, is it going to be hot or cold tomorrow? Will it rain or will the sun shine, for example? By overlaying the two axes, you get a matrix with four quadrants, where each quadrant represents like a unique combination of two of the extremes. Each of these quadrants are then the basis for our scenarios. We chose the two uncertainties that define the living future scenarios after a lot of discussions among ourselves and our partners and doing research. And we had previously worked with more like focused sets of scenarios, like the future of Danish healthcare. But we wanted something more general this time and tried to build like a general resource where we could look across sectors, for example. So we looked across our previous work and the work of others and identified what we believe to be the two central question that goes across all the different sectors we're interested in exploring, like work, production, mobility, homes and cities, welfare, well-being, social relations, and so on. The first question that we worked with and that we ended up choosing was what drives value creation? Are we going to leave it up to the market to solve our problems by identifying our needs and providing the solutions? Or are we heading for something where we, as a society, decide to do things differently and might change our priorities, where economic growth might not be as important as other aspects of life? Secondly, we ask, like, how would we be organized? Would we seek to centralize, integrate, and consolidate into these robust top-down structures with the power to fight back against change? Or would we move towards distributed networks of smaller actors that are capable of adapting to changing circumstances and providing more like tailored solutions to specific problems? When you overlay these two axes, you get our matrix, and you get the 4 quadrants in our scenarios, alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. And those are the 4 scenarios that we will be jumping into in just a second. I won't go into too much detail about how we built them, but it all kind of started at a conference back in January when about 130 knowledgeable people and experts from all over the world joined us for a big co-creation session, like back when you could still do that sort of thing. Where everyone kind of got like a passport that told them what kind of scenario that they lived in. And then they had a series of exercises and resources that helped them kind of build out the world that how they understood it. So, I mean, they had the matrix, but everything else was kind of up to them to define. So they worked with these big cardboard boxes here and these stickers and words that kind of describe the atmosphere. We had like hundreds of these like vacuum sealed artifacts with labels they could write on and kind of reinterpret as something new in their world. And then we had these kind of questions about some of the central concepts that we would like them to consider, like what is security, what is family life, what is borders, and these sort of things. In the end, we gathered it all up and processed it into the scenarios and the stories that we're about to hear a few of today. So ultimately, what we ended up with was, among other things, a series of personal stories from the future. At the moment, we have 6 different perspectives on each of the scenarios, but we expect to have at least 10 before we release this resource later this fall. Today, we'll meet 3 of them. We call them Rita, Olga, and Dominic. Rita is part of a small rural community where she works as a surveyor. Olga works in distribution, and Dominic just got a new job in manufacturing. You'll begin listening to the stories in just a second. And then as we listen, please consider, like, what are some of the like risks and opportunities that comes to mind. After we've listened to the first scenario, we'll have a brief reflection where we'd like to ask you to kind of post your reflections in the chat, just as an exercise of kind of putting this down into words. I'll give a very brief introduction to the scenario, and then we'll listen to the first stories now. So we'll start with Alpha, our market-driven and centralized version of 2050. In Alpha, businesses have developed minds of their own. Large tech companies have grown into huge like AI-powered behemoths that feed on the data of their comprehensive ecosystems. People are offered hyper-personalized services and products within these walled gardens provided by the large corporations, often referred to as networks. So networks can provide everything from like housing and healthcare to entertainment and insurance, but everything comes with a price, and plans and premiums vary. You can seek out other networks, but most people are simply born into one, not unlike the citizenships of the past.
I actually grew up on this island, and after I finished school, I moved back here. Today, I work as a site inspection specialist for one of the big tech companies. I inspect sites that are being considered for new investments, like construction or resource extraction. Typically, the AIs are surveying most sites on their own through drones and satellite imagery, but oftentimes they flag particular sites for human inspection, meaning a human pilot is required to inspect. This is typically in case of an anomaly or a very complex site. I do all my surveying work from home. Today, all surveying is done remotely. It was one of the reasons why I chose this career to begin with. Before I started school, I wanted to try living in the city, and it wasn't a great success, to put it mildly. I ended up spending almost every waking moment walking around the island in a virtual world. Kind of seemed like a waste of time when I could just move back home, and so I did. I still check in with my colleagues at the virtual office in between inspections, so it's not like I'm missing anything. I definitely don't miss going to a physical office. I mean, with the new generation of tech, the virtual office feels as real as any, with the added bonus that I can simply shut down my colleagues whenever I want to. I don't want to let my career dictate where I live, and I don't have to. It's much more meaningful to me to live out here, closer to nature and to where I grew up, even if it means only ever having access to rural basic plans with very limited coverage. We don't have the same weather protection tech out here either. When the vicious winter storms hit, and we all have to make way for our shelters, then sure, I do wish for a second that I'd stayed in the city. But no, many people are shocked when they hear it, but I grew up on this island, and I'm not giving it up. Even if our network provider is constantly limiting our plan in an attempt to pull us into the city.
I work distribution for one of the major networks. Distribution is handled automatically. Everything is routed, handled, delivered, without anyone ever touching the goods. Our facility handles millions of individual shipments every week, but we're only ever 2 or 3 people present. Our work here is primarily about supervising the automated processes and investigating errors that require us to be present to verify and to manually troubleshoot. Everything is automated, so our work is mostly a matter of troubleshooting, liability, and risk. In case of an emergency and the AI loses control, we're able to manually override the system. Our network has a global reach and shipments come from all over the world. I'm not a scientist, but as far as I understand it, then the AI is aware of every single shipment, what it contains, where it is going, and the estimated delivery time down to a few minutes. It is constantly reevaluating its route, taking everything into consideration: the vehicle, the packaging, the weight distribution, the path through the sorting facility, the traffic, and even the weather. Most of our shipments are handled during the night, so we always have a few people here. Back in the days, it would have been my responsibility to plan the shifts, but the AI does that automatically according to data on our staff. Stuff like their history and performance, current hormone levels, sleep and productivity patterns, and stuff like that. It's great as it makes everything much more flexible. It can instantly adapt if something happens or someone is homesick. For example, by reworking shifts, rerouting traffic, or hiring new staff within days.
I was recently reassigned to a new division within the company. It's a new team overseeing the automated production of limbs for synthetic support animals. Apparently, corporate intelligence saw me as a greater candidate. No one knows the specifics, but they highlighted my passion for bird watching. I recognized what looks natural, they said. I'm fortunate to be on a network with a generous pension plan, but I can't see myself stopping anytime soon. And with the new biotechnology, I don't have to. As part of the relocation, they offered to upgrade my biolenses so I could take full advantage of the new augmented office space. The lenses came with an upgraded cognitive implant that stimulates my other senses too and heightens my awareness. Our production office is a box with glass on all sides, but simply by thinking it, I can move it to a peaceful forest, our virtual corporate campus in the Alps, or our automated production facility 20,000 kilometers from here. If I need to inspect or interact with anything on site, I simply link up with the drone. Our production facility used to be based closer to here, but a few months ago, it was moved, pretty much overnight. 2 weeks later, we were up and running, thousands of kilometers away. A few days later, the country we produced in before was hit by a devastating hurricane that put a sudden halt to most activities. The AI might have seen it coming.
So those were our first three stories. So what we would like you to do right now is just to take a minute or two to think about like what are some of the risks or opportunities you see in these scenarios, and please feel free to write them in the chat. We already had some really good examples. So yeah, I'll be back in just a minute. So thank you for all the great, like, insightful comments. I think there's a lot of really interesting comments about like what are the role of humans, like are they more like secondary to technology, and are they simply supporting it and no longer really directing it? I think this is some really good points. And I think this is an interesting reflection as we move on to the next scenario. So now we'll move on to the next step, which is the beta scenario, or the scenario that is still centralized and still in these like big structures, but it has like a more society-driven approach. So in beta, systemic issues were destroying the planet and fueling unprecedented levels of inequality, but not anymore. People have put their trust in a political solution, large monolithic structures with the power to not only resist, but actually fight back. Governments have been empowered with a wide mandate to regulate society as needed and to ensure society is socially and environmentally constructive, the public good. But who are the public, and what is good? The geopolitical stakes have been raised as strategic resources are not necessarily readily available on a free market, and the us versus them rhetoric has sharpened. Deals need to be brokered, and if a deal cannot be reached, well, then there's other ways that you can get what you need. Societies, nations, cities, and communities are defined by their heritage, history, and culture and values, and the land on which they were founded. It binds them together as one and gives them strength. And you have to be strong, as there are others out there who want what you have and are willing to fight you for it. Let's hear the stories.
This farm has been in my family for generations. I tried living in the city for a short while, but I just couldn't let it go. I have to stay here on this island, as complicated and dangerous as it might be. I work as a surveyor for the National Environmental Control Unit. We enforce the current standards in farming, forestry, construction, and so on. We normally spend our days following up on a mix of surveillance footage, public sensor data, and the occasional tip from a concerned citizen, as well as a few random samples. Back in the days, we might have had to physically go to site inspections, but today, we do it all remotely through drone and satellite inspections. This is why I got my certification to begin with. The island, our home, is currently protected as a historical site. However, in recent years there have been more and more attempts to revoke its status by politicians in the city. That would effectively mean that we have to move, as no public services will be guaranteed, and the coastal protection would cease to be maintained. I mean, I get why it's cheaper to gather up everyone behind the dams, the canals, and the walls of the big cities. But this is our home. We weren't the ones that messed up the climate so badly to begin with that the planet is now trying to kill us all. It was the big corporations and the politicians themselves. They shouldn't make us pay for their mistakes. We're not giving up. We will protect this place, no matter how many bills, hearings, and master plans we have to fight our way through.
I'm a distribution controller. Our team is part of the World Mobility Organization, working with teams across the world. In the WMO, we organize and control the distribution and shipment of cargo across all registered private operators, making sure that no vehicles are traveling half empty, that critical shipments are prioritized, and that all shipments follow the International Nairobi Convention for Local Production and Ethical Shipping. Our offices are located here in the city. We're the coordination lead for this region and are in daily contact with the leaders of each of the countries in our region. Some of our neighboring countries have had foreign agents interfere with shipping data in coordinated attacks over the last couple of months. Things like critical shipments constantly being redirected to destinations abroad, points of entry being shut down, non-existent shipments flooding the systems, that sort of thing. Naturally, security is a top priority at the moment. One part of my job is to plan our shifts. Someone has to be here at all times, as just many shipments are handled at night. It's not always fun, but someone has to do it. Some people are exempt from the worst shifts, of course, as they have certain conditions, but otherwise, we try to divide the graveyard shifts evenly among us all. As a public organization, we have to follow some of the highest standards for healthy work environments. That can be a challenge. One thing is that the hours are obviously classified as a health risk. Another thing is the matter of our work. Because we deal with critical infrastructure, the responsibilities for most of our jobs are classified as very high, which means that we have to take a lot of precautions to avoid people being exposed to unnecessary stress factors.
I got recruited for a new job just a few months ago, overseeing production at an A+ certified sensor company. They wanted someone with experience and a track record of stability. It's nice to feel they needed that. Right now, we're focused on a project to improve the lighting in city parks, making sure it feels safe, while also making sure not to disturb the wildlife. It's a really interesting problem to tackle. We develop and produce the sensor for the lighting system, but we work with a range of different other partners, like other suppliers, designers, the municipalities, the park authorities, and the local communities. Most of our work happens virtually, but from time to time, there are town hall meetings or site inspections where people get together. Meeting people you work with in the fresh air is just different. All our systems operate on an open standard and are integrated with our partner systems as well as the public infrastructure, resource allocation, and worker platforms. We know where every single gram of material in the sensor has been, who handles it through its life cycle, and whether it delivers the results we promised.
We need to track literally everything. This is, of course, required to prove that we are in line with the A+ guidelines, that our production process has a positive environmental and social impact, and so on.
As an A+ company, the authorities need a real-time overview of our business. If we couldn't give them that, we would be downgraded to B+, and that would inhibit us from pursuing the most interesting and lucrative contracts.
All right, so that was beta. Now again, please have just a minute or two to reflect on what your immediate thoughts are. What are some of the risks or opportunities? I know there's already a lot of really good comments in the chat. I'm reading along here. We might have time to kind of discuss a bit more towards the end. Linda asks if there's a way to see all the comments in the chat. I think it's because all of you are sending your messages to what's called all panelists. That means that I get all your really good comments, but you don't see each other's. So I think you can change your who you're sending it to from all panelists to all panelists and attendees, because then you can kind of, share your insights with each other. It's a good question. I hope we figured it out. All right, but then, let's keep moving. And now we'll move to the third future, and we're going to the exact opposite of what we just came from. We're going to Gamma, which is market-driven and distributed. So in Gamma, the world is moving faster and faster and faster. The actions, ideas, or innovations of an individual can ripple across the world in minutes, as entire industries, communities, and movements can bloom or burn out in just a matter of weeks. People have broken free from the grasp of yesterday's rulers. Tired old monoliths have fallen and broken into pieces, while nimble networks have risen in their place. Agile distributed structures are the only way if you want to experience any kind of longevity. Society is driven by independent and entrepreneurial individuals, always in motion and hungry to eat while they can. You are your own business, and your skills, your network, and your resources make up your product portfolio. Stability, roots, and belongingness in the real world are privileges reserved for those who really made it. Everyone else must find comfort and community in the temporary or virtual hubs and communities that flourish until they don't.
This island has been my home my entire life. I've tried, but I simply couldn't leave it behind. I feel connected to it. I now work as an independent surveyor. Life as a contractor can be hard, but everyone says that. I chose this career to be free to stay here, where I belong. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy the work, but the best part is that I can do it from home. As a surveyor, I get my gigs on a day-to-day basis through the various broker platforms. Rarely know what I'm doing the day before. It can be everything from inspecting a deserted manufacturing complex to a potential site for resource extraction. I get jobs all around the world. When I've gotten the brief, I find a place near the location to lease the necessary equipment, typically drones and various sensors. My sister, who lives halfway across the world, has been recreating our family home on a virtual version of the island. Last month, our entire family met up for the first time in 2 years, this time virtually. We had a lovely meal on the beach as the sun went down. The whole family was there. The sand was everywhere as the kids ran around barefooted. It was great. The smell of the ocean, the textures, the sound of the waves, the taste of grilled fish. It's wild how real it felt, and I'd been at the actual beach just a few hours earlier. I think we all felt that it was a good alternative when we couldn't meet in person. Well, until my sister had a giant eagle swoop down from the sky and take my mum away when she started asking her too many questions about her career. It was a hilarious sight, but my mum really wasn't a fan of the bonus feature. She's not getting in there again anytime soon, I think.
I work at a local distribution hub. We're part of a larger global network of independent operators. I'm the manager, so that makes me in charge of our bidding on the various shipment exchange platforms. That's how we get the majority of our jobs. It works like this. Tasks are listed, and operators like us make bids to handle them. Or, well, the AI handles the actual thousands of bids we make every hour, but I oversee it. Working in distribution is quite stable compared to many other industries out there. It's also very sought after. The only positions we sometimes have problems filling are the night shifts. Tend to be a lot of newcomers, people who just moved here and need something while they settle in. It's decent pay, and we've built a robotic system that is entirely autonomous, so someone only really needs to be there in case something goes wrong. I'm very grateful for this job. I've had it for almost 3 years now. Would you believe that? In today's environment, entire industries can rise and fall within months. No matter what they do, however, they all seem to need something to move from A to B. We do urban shipping, last mile kind of deliveries. Sometimes we handle the entire shipments, other times we simply take over and handle the very last stretch. Most of our shipments are handled by our unmanned cargo carriers, while heavier shipments are delivered by our courier bots. Our unmanned cargo carriers are loaded at the warehouse and then circulate the city as the drones fly around it like a beehive. They buzz around as they make deliveries or pick up new shipments. It can be pretty fascinating to look at, especially on a hazy morning. All you see in the fog is the little red and green lights of the drones.
We just renewed our contract with a network producing furniture with integrated neural uplinks. Basically, it's ergonomic chairs and beds that connect with the implants in your brain and relax your body while your mind is hard at work. We've actually been working on developing the tech with the team in Lagos for almost half a year. Until now, quantities have been low, but we finally reached a point where we can scale our production. Some of the components we produce ourselves, while other parts are sourced from local suppliers. It's a larger consortium though. The original team was much larger, but there were some major ethical disagreements. The other group wanted to implement cognitive limiter technology, basically tech that allows you to turn off your brain and enter a self-induced coma. It didn't sit well with us, so we split. Most of the other nodes we're working with now entered the production network after the prototype was complete. My team and I make up one production node in a mesh network of hundreds. The developer nodes push updates, and the production nodes manufacture the wares locally. We have the rights for this region, while other nodes handle other regions. Most of us work together here in the workshop, but we've also got a few who work remotely. It's really hard to find affordable neuroengineers locally, especially around these parts. This kind of product is often used for entertainment, but they can be used professionally as well. I have a tiny implant behind my ear myself that is connected to the operating system in our workshop. It gives me real-time overview of all current running processes. It's hard to explain, but I can literally feel what all the machines are doing. I feel the input from all the sensors like they're part of my body. If something goes wrong, it pinches me.
All right, so those were the stories from Gamma. What do you think are some of the risks or opportunities of this kind of world? Anas is saying that this actually sounds like business as usual for the next 30 years. I think it might for some people. It's also another comment from Leil Eckert. I wonder how in a world this fractured and reliant on unnumbered contractors and stakeholders, international news would look like. Yeah. So I mean, I think everything will be in some way more global and more local at the same time. Linda writes, strong competition. Yeah, I think everything is on like a competition. Ryoshi, a virtual holiday replacing a real one and be similar in impact as a real one would be challenging to visualize. Yeah, so I think that's kind of like what we're trying to create here is kind of like the idea that you could virtually feel like you could feel as connected to like a virtual world as a real one, so to speak, or at least realities would be competing in the sense that, I mean, it would only really be the tiniest details that might kind of make you able to see what is real and what isn't. All right, so let's move on to the next scenario, our last one, the Delta scenario. And here we're moving into the society distributed corner. In Delta, engaged citizens and grassroots movements have the initiative and drive the change they want to see from the bottom up. So society was heading for ecological and societal and social collapse in the name of profit, and all proposed changes were too little and too late. If something radical was to happen, it needed to start from the bottom, and so it did. Today, the system has been flipped into something much closer and more citizen-driven. All the bureaucracy was redundant. It was too slow and too far removed from the people it was supposed to look after. Community and a symbiotic relationship to nature is more important than material riches. Not saying that innovation has halted, it has simply taken on a more open and community-based approach, focused on creating shared value for societies. So let's hear the last round of stories, and please feel free to add your reflections in the chat.
The first apple trees were planted behind the barn by my great-grandfather almost 100 years ago. Every generation since then has planted more, and today we have a decent-sized orchard. I would never be able to leave this place. The orchard is my lifeblood. And when spring comes around, I try to spend every hour of sunlight caring for the trees. It's seasonal work, of course. During the winter we maintain the gear, the robots, and the old property. Apart from managing the orchard, I also do some work as a surveyor. It's a nice added income, especially during the winter, and I can do it from home. I typically do a mix of routine inspections for the local community and site inspections for businesses interested in building new facilities in the area. The salinity of the waters around here is low enough that it's still viable to have fish farming without expensive desalination. I'm not sure what I think about the fish farms, but they're crucial for the survival of our little community. Without the money, we wouldn't be able to construct some of the coastal protection we critically need. The harvest is a local tradition. People from all over the island chip in, and we have a big party when we're done. For the rest of the year, we have some farmhands that help run things. Most of them come from the city, looking for a getaway. It's not a lucrative gig, but we offer food and lodging, as well as some nice peace and quiet.
I work at the local community distribution center. Most people call it the post office, like in the old days. It started as a joke when we only had daily deliveries, but it stuck, even as our systems got better. We were one of the first businesses to be approved by the community as a community service, so we're typically a mix of paid and unpaid community contributors. I'm responsible for our staffing, so I'm the one who introduces newcomers to the various systems and makes sure everyone feels good. I'm also in charge of our recruitment drives whenever a new sign-up date comes close. It's fair to say that we're not topping the charts, but we've been getting more and more popular over the last couple of years, especially among some of the geekier teenagers who've been having a lot of fun building new delivery bots for us. We switch roles every once in a while, but I kind of like this one the most. Almost all shipments enter or leave the area through us, whether it is filaments for home production or fresh produce from the rural communities on the outskirts of the city. We don't have a lot of international shipments anymore. People tend to buy the designs and have them produced locally on demand by one of the local workshops. It means only very advanced parts or basic materials that can be transported more efficiently are shipped around.
I just started working down at the local lab. We're working on producing components for a new promising type of battery for our local solar panels. A community in Morocco has created this really ingenious solution that is easy enough to replicate, although the documentation is kind of lacking at this early point. We just have to train the algorithms to our climate and weather. It feels nice to contribute to something bigger, to make stuff together. I'm passionate about this, and I think it shows. I like to think it rubs off on some of the younger ones. They haven't witnessed the same transformation of society as some of us walking dinosaurs have. They're good kids, though. Some of them help out down at the shop. We currently have 3 bots in the workshop. One of the girls has helped me teach the robots how to do the physical installation of the batteries. It has been a game changer, and I couldn't have done it without her. Now they go out at night, mount the hardware, and hook it up with the network at night, when it doesn't interfere with anyone's business. Well, except a few concerned citizens who call us up and complain after having seen the robots wandering around at night. I get why they can look spooky, but they're just installing batteries. Many of the local businesses have asked us to help them increase their energy capacities for years, and they have been so grateful. The people down at the bakery even baked us a cake shaped like a battery.
All right, so that was the last 3 stories from Delta. So again, let's just take a few minutes to reflect, but otherwise, I think we might have time for just a few questions. Yeah. So Anas writes, sounds very nice, but will the scale work? The idea of small communities working together has been around for a long time, but so very often seems to turn bad. And I think this scenario is, like, having presented it to a few people so far, is something that many people like tend to orient themselves towards. Like, this sounds nice, but I mean, what you also have to remember is that, I mean, just as we move closer together, so does conflict move closer to home. So I mean, just as if you might be able to establish a community of like-minded people in your like local area, there could be a similar community just a few kilometers away, where people are like based on very different kind of ideological or values, and in that sense, I think you are more dependent on your network, but you're also more like exposed to conflict. Yes, Lael Eckert writes, with communities being responsible for their survival themselves, what or who keeps them from spending their resources irresponsibly? Who figures in the interest of future generations? And I think that's, I think, the challenge as well. I mean, if everything is decided locally, it will be up to you to help kind of create the system that you want to see, whether it is based on more like long-termism or if it's something that is very much here and now. I think I might just move forward to escape the music. Yeah, so I think maybe just dwell on this one for a second. So I don't know. I think we're almost running out of time, but if there are any like burning questions, I would love to ask them or answer them, sorry. And otherwise, please feel free to reach out if you're interested in learning more about like the Living Futures project or in kind of like joining our community. We're trying to kind of build up a community of people who are kind of contributing and driving this project forward, because I think we see it as not just this kind of one-off publication or like finished product, but something that we intend to kind of keep on developing and fine-tuning and changing as we learn more. So it's like a living resource in that sense. Yeah. So I mean, it's been really interesting to follow along in these comments. Thank you so much for it. It's been really exciting. Um, so Shiroshi asks, which of the four scenarios seems to you as closest to being a better version of our current scenario? I think that's a good question, and I don't think I'm able to really answer it. I think the exercise here is not so much to kind of, you know, to have one of these four scenarios kind of define the way forward or predict where we're going. I think it's more about opening up the opportunity space. So I don't think I would prefer any of them. I think there are elements in each of them that I would be interested in kind of seeing kind of merged, but I don't really have so much a personal favorite in that sense, where I really just kind of would just want one single scenario, because I think there's pros and cons to all of them, and I think that's kind of like the discussions that we want to kind of unlock. Um, you're welcome. Oh, yeah, it's my birthday today. Linda says happy birthday. Yeah, thank you. um, Anna's asked, have you already been doing much like backcasting to the 2050, from 2050 to 2020? And has this produced any surprises? I think right now we're only ever really getting this out there and trying to show it to people. We have a lot of like interesting projects lined up where these tools will be part of a more like a closer, or part of a more like a innovation or and business development initiatives where we will use them to kind of do much more like backcasting as well. So I think we don't have have that much data yet. But we're getting a lot of stuff just these days, as we're also just sharing it with people like you. So Layla asks, were the personas developed during the workshop you talked about or afterwards? They were, I mean, they were actually used as kind of very blank. We had the names at the workshop, so they were, but otherwise they were blank, and people working in the different scenarios worked with kind of writing quotes and stories from them. So they were in some sense developed during the workshop, but I think we did a lot of like, pattern recognition, because I mean, we had several groups working on on the different scenarios, and as such, it was a little, there had to be a bit of a post processing of it. So I think in some sense they're still based on it. I mean, the data from that conference is what really is kind of the foundation of all the work that we have today. And thank you for the congratulations.